Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Justin White. I'm here with Julio from
Don.
Alky Control.
Yeah.
Is it actually Julio Don?
Julio Don.
Wendy's like, is that really his name? I'm like,
Yeah, it is.
I'm pretty sure it says
if it was
on
Don Julio, I'd be the tequila guy, which is a little different.
Which is kind of funny because you deal
Dealing
in alcohol as well.
Yeah, but I'm dealing the kind you burn for power. Not
Okay,
the
we got to
kind you
make
drink
sure.
for drunk.
Got to make sure that this is an episode on methanol injection, not the blue stuff.
Yes.
It's not a Breaking Bad thing. So if you tuned in for that, I'm sorry.
Yes.
It's not going to be this. We're out here at Cadillac Attack 2025. We finally got that over with. We have our videos posted on how that went. Spectacular-ish. But so we're in our hotel, Homewood Suites, and they let us use this lobby area. So don't mind the fans because we couldn't find the switch. But basically, I've been dealing with Julio since I think 2011, using his alcohol control systems for methanol injection, bouncing ideas off of him, trying to learn more as we go, and kind of wanted to sit down like I do with most people. I want to learn the story, how you got into this, why you do this, and then kind of go over the product. A lot of things, a lot of misconceptions about methanol because a lot of people have this stigma towards it, and we've had great success with it. So I guess leading off with, where you started, what your business is, and then kind of doing the history.
My history with the product, it was made out of a need. The need that I had was back in 2000. I purchased a turbo Trans Am, which was like a Buick Grand National, with a turbocharged 3.8. And the way things were run back then is that when I would go to the racetrack, I would simply bring 2 5-gallon cans. One would have C12 in it or C16, and the other one was empty. I'd make sure the car was like at about a quarter tank by the time I got to the racetrack. And as I'm getting to the track, then I would go ahead, hook up the hose to the fuel rail, drop the pump gas out of it so I could empty out the tank, pour in then the race gas into it, and then I would proceed to race. But here I'm carrying these cans of race fuel inside of an open cockpit car because the Trans Am is open in the back and forth from the track. And it was a heavy inconvenience. If I leave the track with the race gas in it, by the time I got home, the O2 sensors would be wiped out from the lead in it. So at that point, there was a company called SMC, and they were at that time making alcohol injection systems. And it basically was like a little tank with a little Chrysler minivan fuel pump. And it had like a little hop switch you can adjust on the dash so it could turn on under boost. And then that, at a certain boost level, spray alcohol into the engine. Now I could go to the track, I could race, I'd have alcohol into the car, and I'd stop having to run this race gas and these cans going back and forth and transporting them. That was okay until the car got to a certain performance level that I needed more than that little Chrysler fuel pump could produce. So then it came with, okay, let's put a bigger pump. But then I got this bigger pump. The bigger pump then created a problem that it just overwhelmed the engine every time it kicked on. It was either on or off. Once that problem happened, I had to figure out a way to make the kit more progressive. At that time, those pumps that were used, the larger ones, people would then put like 3 hop switches, which is a pressure switch. So they'd activate, they would activate 3 nozzles, one at, let's say, 7 pounds of boost, one at 15 pounds of boost, one at 25 pounds of boost. And that's how they would stage the alcohol going into an engine. But that was really dirty because hop switches, they turn on at 7, but they don't turn off until they're 4, or they weren't exact. So the better way was to come up with a progressive controller. And in March of 2003, since I had a little time, which made me dangerous, I started developing my own controller. And after 13 revisions to that controller over 6 months, using my car to beat on it, test it, and changes, I made a controller. So then the controller was, hey, I got a controller. You guys with these pumps, with these 3 hop switches and stuff like that, put the controller on. This will solve your problem. 1 nozzle, problem resolved, cleaner, simpler, more effective. That led to, well, we don't want to do that. We want you to make us a kit so we can just bolt it into the car. And then that's what starts the business for me. So in August 2003, my business starts making kits for Buick Grand Nationals. And that's what starts it. After trials and tribulations, things that over the years learned, the initial kits were simple. There was a light that would just come on when the kit comes on, but that was it. But the fail on that was that there was no way of somebody knowing if the kit's really working or not. It was, guessing. So that led in 2005, let's put pressure sensing on this. Let's make a light that changes colors. And then that got implemented. And then we ran through over the past 20 years, like this hose doesn't last very long in alcohol. This switch doesn't last very long. This part, this has to change. The pump has to need this. Like we're the first company to put sleeves to protect the motors from water getting into them. Yeah. Because that was another problem. In some cars like Corvette C5, C6s, the pumps sit under the windshield drains. So the water hits the pump, hits the pump, hits the pump, hits the pump. Water gets into the pump, seizes the pump. Now the kit doesn't work. So this is 22 years doing this. I've figured out what it takes to basically keep the system as robust and as reliable as possible. And that's basically the history on it. Our systems are the only ones that have filters on them automatically. Every kit gets a filter. Every kit, there's not a chance of a clogged nozzle. Every kit, the lines are stainless steel braided, AN fittings, so there's no hose that's going to pop off. Every kit is basically going to have a controller with lights that'll change, letting you know that they work. Every kit will have an indicator, whether it's the factory one or one that we add, letting you know that the tank is low. There's a test button on every kit that lets you pre-test the system, letting you know that the kits work.
Well, now there's two.
Now the new ones have, again, through necessity.
Mm-hmm.
So the newer pumps now started in August of 21. We went to a different manufacturer, and as of now, we are in February of 2025. We've got about 5,000 pumps out of the new style, and out of these, we haven't had one leaking pump.
Well, and that
out
was
of the new ones.
That was something that on the older pumps,
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people had an issue with the leaking thing.
Yes.
But two things that I saw is when the pump was mounted specifically on a C6, and I can't think of the other car. Basically, the pump would be sitting against like a metal part, and it would be bumping on it. And over time, that would either cause a seal leak. The other thing, it seems to only be affected mostly in cars that were up north. Like my customers that are in the north, I guess where it gets really cold. I don't know if that has a factor on it, but down south, our pumps never leaked. It's very rare.
The problem up north is that you have a temperature goes to 0.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when things get cold? They shrink.
Yeah.
So then when a pump gets a couple of years in and it gets really cold, the rubber plate sinks. It basically shrinks, and then that's when you get your leaks.
Okay. But the new pump is a totally different pump.
Completely different manufacturer. Another problem was the old pumps had no rev limiter. In other words, somebody could get 400 pounds of pressure out of them because there would be nothing that could stop pressure on them. So a lot of people then would run them in such a way, looking for this uber high pressure that over time wears out the plate inside, wears out the upper housing, warps it, and causes problems. The newer pumps, they have a preset, let's say 200 pounds. And once it hits 200, kind of like a fuel pressure regulator, it keeps it from going any higher.
Is it 200 or 250?
The new pumps are 200 on the small regular version pumps. Even the larger motor ones that we have now are still 200. Now, the larger motor, when you can crank a knob on them, they'll go up to 400 pounds. But there's no reason to run that kind of pressure. If you're having to run that pressure, it's simply harder on the pump, harder on the upper housing, harder on the plate, harder on things.
Yeah.
The new pump on change, the heads have 7 bolts instead of 6. The new pumps, the heads are thicker. So now that changes things. So it's got better clamping, better holding of parts together.
Well, and you can swap the head out.
The newer pump now, $85 on the website, get a brand new head.
Right. Yeah, that was.
So there's no excuse for service. Oh, we got to send it in. You don't. Just go on the website, order a head for $85, take one off, put the other one in. Just 3 screws and 2 hose fittings.
Yeah. I mean, and even if you had to do that, you don't, but even if you had to do that once a season, just to know that that thing's tip top. I mean, that's pretty cheap maintenance if you ask me.
Honestly, it's funny that somebody might have $20,000 in an engine and they question the $85.
That's an oil change though.
Not even.
That's what
on
I'm
some
saying.
cars. You do 10 quarts of Royal Purple.
I do Valvoline, okay? Valvoline, if you're out there and you want to
Right.
sponsor.
Right.
holla.
But I mean, this is right. And I mean, but this is something that is inexpensive. If you do it every 2 to 3 years.
But I don't
should
think
be
people
golden.
know that. That's the thing. That's part of what this is. This is because I want you guys to know that this stuff is avoidable. All these issues that you hear with methanol control, we've been using methanol control since 2011. I have to date never had a pump failure. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I guarantee I've done hundreds of kits and I've never had a failure. I've had a leak and it was easily remedied, but I've never had a system not come on or not work. Again, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm sure something could happen, but those controllers have been pretty, and you know, I know you're like, don't turn that knob up too. I'll turn that knob all the way up. Now that I
people
watch
do that.
pressure, I do.
Right.
But that's something I want to go into, but back to the simple parts of it, right? The filter, which is the one, the little thing with the arrows on it.
Yeah.
The filter is definitely something I don't see, but I do see a lot of these other meth kits that have the push lock lines. And why don't you do that?
Because it's not a problem of if it's going to leak, it's when, because it's guaranteed to.
Because
The air brake line through heat cycling and stuff, take one step back. Methanol alcohol is specific gravity is 0.79, means that water is 1. So methanol is 21% thinner than water. If it was maple syrup, the push-in line would never leak. But because it's 0.79, it's a very thin liquid.
that's why it leaks so easily if it does leak.
If you have a place, it's transmission fluid on a pan. If you have the little spot that's bad, it's going to leak out because the fluid is so thin. Methanol is super thin as a liquid, so if there's any chance for it to leak, it's going to leak. So that's why all the hoses have to be done with AN fittings, some kind. Some companies, the issue with the air brake line is to make the kit more inexpensive.
That's what I thought, because I couldn't see an advantage of it.
Well, see, there's 2 ways of doing this stuff. There is the way that somebody sells a universal kit that fits everything. You know, they'll give you 3 nozzles, they'll put a plastic tank, hoses, a little razor blade. You basically push hoses in, you connect them, and away you go. The only downside to that is that it's not really made for the vehicle. And it opens up circumstances to now the person installing it has to know what they're doing. And on top of that, it's like, I don't understand, why do we have to skimp on lines? God forbid we run straight alcohol like majority of my customers do. God forbid.
There's another option?
Yes, they run windshield washer fluid. They run a mixed liquid of 50-50. There's other things.
That's too much work. Because if you tune it on, my opinion, if I tune a car on 50-50, right? And I'm like, you mix this water to this methanol, what happens if they mess that up? I'm relying on that customer to make that 50-50 perfect.
A lot of cars might not like 50-50.
But I'm just saying, even if you tuned it on 50-50,
Yeah.
what if they put
60-40,
right,
or 30
Well,
or
now,
40-60.
Now the tune's off.
Now the tune is off.
So I run M1, or we'll get into some other stuff if we try that later.
If you have a flammable liquid,
that's what I'm saying. It's offsetting some kind of fuel, because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't use it for fuel. I use it for just cooling. And that's great, but that's still going to offset your fuel in some way. There's no way to put the methanol in there and it not offset your actual fueling, correct?
Yeah.
So, but I know a lot of these systems, and I haven't really messed with a lot of the other meth systems. But a lot of them I've seen in the directions say that you can't run straight M1.
the problem is the lines that are used when they're pushing lines and stuff, because it's a flammable liquid. They don't want the liability, and they know that sooner or later there's going to be a leak, and they can't have a customer be perfect on his cuts on the hoses. So how do you know the guy didn't put a 45 or a 70 instead of a straight cut?
And is it less
hose?
Flammable with the water mixed in it, I guess?
Yeah, anything
Well,
below
obviously it's
50-50
less,
is less flammable. But there comes a point that if you're putting non-flammable stuff into an engine, good luck tuning it.
Well, I've seen a lot of people argue that just water injection works fine. I don't know the science behind it. I'm sure you do.
Yeah, what it is that the harder it is for something to burn, the more octane it has. So water has infinite octane.
Mm-hmm.
So
How does it
87.
have, wait, how's
The harder it is to burn a fuel, the higher the octane it is, because it slows the burn down.
Okay.
So 87 octane simply burns a lot faster than 116 does.
Right.
And that's how you can basically control your cylinder pressure, by basically slowing down the burn.
Mm-hmm.
That's what race gas does, simply said. So water basically increases the octane that the motor sees. But there comes a point that it takes the place of fuel in the combustion chamber, and that's what pushes the piston down.
Okay.
So if you're going to put something in your combustion chamber, you want it to push the piston down, not...
Right, which the fuel's not going to do that. It's
I mean, if you want free water injection, just pour some water in your gas tank. It's going to go right into your cylinder.
That was something I've always thought, but I didn't understand why, I don't know. They say that it makes a difference, but I know they're making more power, but I guess they're only doing it because the water is slowing that burn down. But how is it allowing them more timing? That's what I'm not understanding.
If you have an engine that's knocking, you spritz some water into it, it's going to control the knock.
Is it from the vaporization of the
Yes.
water?
Well, I mean, right, because it's going to raise the octane, the cylinder is going to cool down, and it's going to help with the knock issue.
Okay.
World War II, that's how the bomber started. That's how this water injection started. It started in the 40s. B-52 tries to take off with a payload. They would detonate the motor. So if they sprayed water through them, it would just basically cool the engines down, and they would stop detonation. So water injection has been around forever. I didn't invent water injection. Water injection, the U.S. military has been had this forever. In the 80s, you had, Edelbrock had a vaporizer kit. Holly's had little kits with little kegs where you put water and you could spritz them on top of a carburetor, for help cleaning them and stuff like that. So this technology has been around forever. The twist is that the Buick guys in the 90s, I think BG Customs was probably one of the early ones. They used to have like a little keg with a little windshield washer motor spray into the intake with a hop switch. This is like technology going 30 years now. And from there, we've taken this technology and going, hey, let's go ahead and put a bigger pump. Let's put better lines. Let's put better fittings. Let's put more pressure. Let's put more regulation, more. And here we are with it.
Well, and another thing that I've noticed, I've heard, is when methanol burns, you can't see the flame.
It's clean.
Right. Well, the issue becoming if you've put in plastic lines in your engine bay and it leaks and it does catch fire, you're not going to know until it's too late.
Well, and if you had a fire in the engine compartment, fiberglass burns and it gives off smoke like crazy. There's every part that's inside the engine compartment. But by the time it's doing that, it's already too chances are it's too late. You shouldn't run a flat. That's the same reason when you use garden hose for a fuel line. It's the same reason.
There's people that do that.
I understand. I'm just saying there are some cars out there that might be it. Somebody might need 5/8 hose and they go to Home Depot and chop and use something like that. They go, oh, my garden hose will hold pressure. This will hold 50 pounds of pressure, no problem. No, because it's not the compatibility.
Well, but that's the reason that I like your approach of it with the AN lines is because if that fuel does leak, it is dangerous, right?
It can be dangerous, yes.
If you hook it up properly and you have the good lines,
yes,
it's a significant less chance of something going wrong.
You've mitigated the chance of failure, the majority of the problem. And it's like I've never had a line failure. The only line failures I've ever had is somebody takes it off and puts it across their alternator or battery or something because it's stainless steel. I've seen that where it arcs. That's the only failure. But if people protect the lines and simply go ahead and keep them away from power sources, the lines have no problems.
Okay.
And they're Teflon based. So if we run like a nitrous line. Mm-hmm. So the other question that comes into play, and the argument is, how about using aluminum? Because everybody loves the way those black fittings look. So aluminum alcohol's corrosive to aluminum.
As soon as you said that, I'm like, that wouldn't work. I'd be corroding it.
If the anodization fails on the aluminum, the alcohol will attack the fitting and attack the threads, and then you will have your plastic line leak problem.
Yeah.
The question is if. So the question is, can aluminum be used if it's a proper fitting? I can't see why not. Like if you have like an aircraft, like something that's properly anodized, then it's probably okay because the anodization will keep the aluminum.
What's the benefit?
They're pretty.
So is the stainless stuff.
Yes, so it is.
That's something I definitely wanted to make sure that people understand that.
Yes, it is.
You have the kit in the brass and that's how it comes.
Yes, for cost.
Right.
Because we're trying to compete against the guys that have plastic lines and nickel fittings.
but it does come in stainless.
Yes. Any kit
And
can
it
be
looks
bought in stainless.
so much better. I was
Yes.
talking to Tim King about getting a kit,
Yes.
and I was like, look, make sure you get the tank in the trunk
Mm-hmm.
and you get the stainless fittings.
Yes.
And he buys everything top line anyways,
Yes.
but that's something I don't think a lot of people know. I don't know what the cost is on the upgrade, but it's definitely worth it for it just looks better. I understand the other fittings, they work great, but
It's the case of something that works good, and the other one's the case of something that looks better. So if looks are a concern, and it depends on the application, it depends on the car. So if you have a $100,000 car, what's a couple $100 more in fittings?
Mm-hmm.
At that point, it's a moot point. But if you have a car that's, $8,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, you don't have a whole lot into it, you're not really into it, you may be installing something, you see how it is, use brass. Let's say you decide, I may want to make new lines. Call us. Hey, listen, I want a 23-inch one. I want a 32-inch one. We'll make the lines.
Well, I've done that before. I think I've called you and I was like, hey, I want to move this, this, and this. And you were like, just give me a measurement and I'll send it.
Yeah.
And 2-3 days, I already had it.
Boom. All the time.
So one thing I want to kind of shoot back a little bit. We talked about the multicolor light, right? The red and the green. I think that's a big thing that a lot of people don't understand. What causes that light to trigger, why it triggers, what you're looking at, and how to make sure, like what pressures do we really need?
So the kits come with a filter on the pressure side because I don't want nothing to clog the nozzle. After the filter is a pressure switch. And that pressure switch, we preset them. They can be adjusted and changed. We set them to 50 pounds. So what that means is that when the system goes over 50 pounds, the switch moves. Once that switch moves, there's a light on your dash that changes from red to green. And that lets the person know, hey, the kit, when it comes on red, meth kit's on. When it flips to green, not only is it on, it's under pressure. So this is part of having feedback. So the kit has a test button. I can start a car up. I can start my car up right now. I'll start it up, bring the idle up to maybe 1500, push and hold test, and I'll see that light go red to green. It's purged, ready, the system's under pressure. I'm ready to make a hit on the car. Mm-hmm. If I go to the track before my first run, hit the test button in the staging lanes. Light goes red to green. The rest of the day, I don't hit the test button anymore. So it's not like I have to constantly do this. Once I get that air out, because the car might be sitting for 3 weeks, might be sitting a month, there might be a little air pocket. The pump might need to be exercised a little. Push the test and do it. Newer controllers now, there's an extra button on them called a bleed button. And what the test button does...
Oh, that's something that most don't ever do when they install this kit. That's definitely something...
The test button only puts 4 volts to the pump. Why? Because I'm trying not to hydrolock an engine. Mm-hmm. So the test, instead of putting 12 volts and blast the pump and let's try to flood the engine and kill it, let's just put like a little light mist on it. And with 4 volts, that pump will go red to green on the light. The bleed button, if I take the hose off and I hit test and bleed on the controller, now I can put 10 volts on the pump. And it really exercises the pump and gets it. So, hey, the methanol's been in that tank for a year. I don't know. I'll just disconnect the hose, hit test and bleed, blow everything out of the tank, put fresh liquid in, test and bleed. When liquid starts flowing evenly, let go, hook up my nozzle. I'm back in business really fast. So, if I put a new pump head as service, test and bleed, drain the tank, change the head, put the new head on, test and bleed, run it till liquid comes out of it nice and strong, reconnect the system, I'm back in business.
So I know a lot of people don't know to go ahead and bleed it. And a lot of people do get away with it. I got away with it for a very long time, but I didn't know. I guess I always made sure that light went green, and because I knew how I understood the light and the switch. And a lot of people, they're like, oh, it went red. Sometimes it goes green, sometimes it doesn't. I'm like, well, that's an issue. But you do need to bleed that. Once you install everything, get everything set up, crack the line, take the fitting off, bleed it through. Yeah. Why won't it just bleed itself?
Because it's kind of like brakes. You have a master cylinder you just changed, and you're wondering why the pedal's spongy. Mm-hmm. So on a brake system, you pound the pedal 3 times, somebody opens the valve. Pound the pedal 3 times, open the valve. So you're trying to exercise and get the air out of the system out of it. The kits usually have a check valve on the nozzle. So the check valve basically
is holding that air in there. Okay. Because I knew it was doing it. I just wanted to make sure.
The check valves on the newer kits and more modern kits usually have check valves, and they inhibit the bleed. Even if they don't have a check valve, that nozzle on the end, being that small little hole on it, impedes liquid from coming out.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's simpler. Buicks, we sell a tester. It's $100 for a Buick tester. And it's a little gauge, goes on top of the tank. You connect the hose to it and a little simulator, and you can run the system to see how much pressure it makes and test the whole kit. We have testers out for all of our kits.
Well, I was going to say, I think something that shops really need to do, because you start seeing these guys that'll be 3 nozzles, 4 nozzles. I've seen 5, but
even 8. Even 10.
Jesus Christ.
You put a direct port with pre-throttle body nozzles.
Right. Which, if you have a shop and you're installing this stuff, you need to have a gauge. Like as soon as you had told me about it, I made a line, and I think you said the switch is at 50. I did 65 to 85 is what my target was. I don't know if you told me that or if that's just what. Basically, I hooked up a bunch of nozzles, made a whole display thing, sprayed it, and between 65 and 85, the pattern looked the best. I tried 3 nozzles on a pump, 3 10s, and versus 2 15s, and the 3 10s did just as good. 2 10s cooled the car more than the 2 15s did, because I could run almost 100 psi on the 2 10s versus like barely 65 on the 2 15s with the same pump. And it was like a 30-degree drop because I ran a car without an intercooler testing stuff out. I think I called you on that one too. But I think that's something that people aren't factoring in either, is that pressure is needed to atomize to dissipate.
You've got to get probably 70 pounds to get atomization, probably. And that's
85 is super pretty.
Oh, it is. But I'm just saying, usually somewhere in that range you have it. Ultimately, the majority of people using these systems are trying to get fuel from them.
Right.
Or they're trying to make a fuel. Somebody runs pump fuel that wants to run an enormous amount of pounds of boost. I've got a customer, he's under 50 pounds of boost on 91 octane in Alaska. And that car ran 4 M15s on 2 pumps with 2 systems. And that was like
2 pumps.
2 pumps on 4 15s, because of he has to overcome that boost pressure of 50 PSI in the pipe. So you got to make 135 pounds of pressure to come with 85 effective. That's another thing all entirely. That's a whole other math.
And that depends on where your nozzle placement is.
Nozzle placement, like your LT blowers or stuff, they're all pre-throttle body, so there's no pressure on there.
Right, but if you do turbos or
if you're doing turbos or whatever, you got to keep it doing. I've done probably 9,000 Buick Grand National kits. 9,000 for a car made 2 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot of cars. The fastest one right now is Russ Merritt's 109 block car, and that car has run 8.8 at 153. It's 41 pounds of boost on pump 93 on a 3,600 pound car. It's got 7-inch wheels, a center console, air conditioning. This is a street car.
Yeah, that's wild.
Right. This is
V6.
V6. Yeah, this is insane. So me and Russ are always talking, and I learn from him just like he learns from me. And he's always pushing the envelope. His car at 30 pounds of boost has a second pump that kicks on with an M10 nozzle. Yeah. You know, get it up to 41. That's an example of, I shouldn't have said that. My Mustang has run 28 pounds of boost on pump 93, and that's a 348 cubic inch small block Ford with a PT88 with a mid-frame 88. My car's run 8.4 at 165 on pump 93. I've run True Street where I've had an 855 average on pump 93, running 30 miles and not touching the car, no laptops, no computers, no changing tires, nothing for a 3-run average. And I'm by far, not the fastest guy or anything like that. Right. So these are examples. How do I run 28 pounds, make, probably 1,300 horsepower, a car that traps 165 miles an hour, that weighs 3,600 pounds. This is a lot of power on just pump 93 that I get from Shell. I mean, that's what this stuff is. That's what we can get out of this stuff. Yeah. Well, but I think the biggest thing needs to be that people need to check these pressures. They need to not just add nozzles and think that this is going to be okay. My number one thing is somebody's always calling and saying they want to get more meth. And then my first question is, how old is the system? It's always the same question. Oh, I want to add an extra nozzle to my kit because we need more meth. And then I go, well, how old is the pump? Because what inevitably happens is they have a kit from 2015, 2017 that somebody's running, somebody just installed, somebody's used, and all of a sudden they want more meth from it, and they're not addressing the number one problem is, let's address the pump. You want to address the pump, get the pump healthy, get it fresh, get it working tip-top, and then address how many nozzles you're going to put on it. Back to what all this stuff, we were having a conversation earlier. There's a couple different ways that people can monitor the meth kit. The best way is with a wideband. The number one way is the car to have a wideband gauge. And that's a gauge that basically reads air fuel. The air fuel gauge is going to tell you when the car is tuned. If that gauge starts reading higher, you're out of fuel, you're out of meth, out of battery power, you've got a problem.
Something's wrong.
Something is wrong, and then you could catch that as an instant. A wideband gauge will save you thousands of dollars if you can just
$250
for $250.
Yeah.
It is the number one gauge. It tells you that your tuner did his job right. It tells you that the meth kit manufacturer did his job right. It tells you that the fuel system manufacturer did their job right. It tells you, and it basically shores up everything. So if you have a wideband and you know what your air fuel are, you probably are going to never lift a head, blow a motor up or anything if your air fuel is where it needs to be. I mean, stuff does break. A connecting rod can snap, a block can split, anything can happen, it's racing, but it really, really, really is, number one is that, wideband, testing your meth kit, using the purge button, being on top of services. The meth kit's only got one thing that needs. The lines don't need to be changed. The filter never needs to be changed. You can wash them backwards. Head on the pump itself, get them serviced every 2 to 3 years. You're ahead. A new head for a pump's $85. And that puts the pump back to, the motors are rated at 1,500 hours.
Yeah.
So if you have a motor's rated at 1,500 hours, it's only used for 6 seconds at a time, the motor will last forever. Unless water gets into it or something crazy.
Right.
You take the car into a ditch, car wash, something crazy that kills the motor that way. But the motor's going to last forever. Just put a new head. If you put a new head on your meth system, keep a wideband, use your test button and purge it, they'll last forever. It will last forever.
You were kind of teasing a picture of a gauge.
Yes.
Is that a thing or?
The gauge was Russ Merritt. He sends me it. He calls me, hey, is it okay if I use your logo on a gauge? Is it okay if I use your logo? Yeah, man, I don't care. Do whatever you want with it. You know, we know each other. So he goes to Speed Hut. Mm-hmm. Uploads the logo, makes a methanol gauge. I'm going, great. You know, and there he is showing me the gauge at 200 pounds of pressure. And I'm going, because he's got the larger pump on a customer's car. He goes, I want this customer to know his pressure. And I put the light that changes colors, red to green, on top of it. So he could see the gauge and he can see the light and he knows that this thing is working without a reasonable doubt. So you can have a gauge for pressure. No, your meth kit's okay. You can have a wideband. But this is like an onion. You got to build layers. So people are saying, you're going to do the gauge. I go, well, the problem is if I got to buy a gauge, it's going to cost me the same as somebody buying a gauge.
I was going to say, couldn't somebody just use, I guess, like a depending on what your pressure needs to be, right? Like a nitrous pressure or like just a random pressure gauge and just put that in the line.
You tee into it. Tee into the meth line. Actually,
that's exactly how I did it. I just made a line and I have a gauge coming off of it.
Right now, if you look at the filter with the pressure switch, that piece is hollow. You can simply drill a hole, tap it 1/8 inch NPT and put a transducer on it and run that to your gauge. Real easy. Or you can buy the fitting from me. You can have a filter like this, make it like this. Keep on daisy chaining fittings. You can put whatever you want on them and it's not a problem. But I'm not getting into the gauge because if I pay $240, what am I going to sell the gauge for?
No, and I get that.
I don't want to, my customers, I'm trying to keep it inexpensive for them. Somebody calls me, hey, call Speed Hut. I'm making free advertising for Speed Hut. Buy a 300-pound gauge with a transducer from them, put the sending unit on it, and voila, you'll have a meth pressure gauge. But
that's for the people that are actually, oh man, I hear all these stories about methanol, and I'm like, well, you just have people that are installing, they're just doing a shitty job installing it. I've had a car come to me and the meth would work great on one pull. It wouldn't work on the next one. Work great, not on the next one. And come to find out there's a butt connector half crimped for the main power feed. I mean, these are things that you can't get past. You got to know who's going to install this and just remember that this is a critical component and these things need to be wired properly. But
imagine if you made a meth kit without a transducer or pressure sensing system on it. where the customer didn't know.
That's a thing. Or I don't know.
That is the thing.
That's a thing.
That's from everybody.
I don't like that.
Well, but they save money by doing this.
Yeah.
And I'll throw this out. I mean, everybody else, there's no other company putting just a simple pressure switch. I mean, I'm just I'm trying to keep it as barbarically simple as that. Nobody puts pressure switches on their kits to let them know. I think Aquamist, I think, does, lights. Maybe, perhaps.
I don't even think they have the LED lights. Like
they don't have the lights. They don't make it easy. Yeah. No, they all have lights that, hey, listen, meth kit's got power, and that's as far as it goes. I was going to say,
all that light that they're putting out there, though, all it does is says, hey, there's voltage going to that pump.
Yes, it like there's a company that makes a gauge with a little graph. I'm not going to say the company, and that graph just tells you the power the pump's getting. But if the hose is connected or not connected, it doesn't change the gauge. Right.
Right. Maybe if they had an amperage, that would be an indication a little, but still.
Some of them even actually disconnect power to the systems if the tank goes low, because everybody's like, well, if the tank's low, let's shut power off to the kit. It's like,
but that's
catastrophic.
Yeah, that might save the pump, but the motor's already dead.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So when people are trying to do this 2 nozzle, 3 nozzle, 4 nozzle thing,
yes,
what do you suggest that they do to? I don't suggest it. I'm like, look, 2 nozzles is all. If you can't fuel your car, and I'm talking about the LT guys mostly because that's what they're doing it in, because they don't want to go port injection or something like that. If you can't fuel your car with 2 15s with 65 to 85 psi behind it, you should probably rethink your fuel system. That's my opinion. But if you got those diehards that just want to do it, what would be the way to do that?
You could actually on 2 15s make 135 pounds of pressure if you had 14 volts on the pump on the car.
Okay,
I
was at 12.
I understand. You'll make more if you get that. And there is a larger version pump that makes a lot more jam. But that's, again, we had a local customer, he just, at Cadillac Attack right now, he just came. And he was going to go from 210 nozzles, he wanted to go to 215s. And the car is going to be, they're throwing the kitchen sink at it for this weekend's race. And I told him, listen, let's do this. It's been a year and a half since you had the kit installed. Let's put the larger pump on it, put the 215s on it. Golden. The car just ran. Made his personal best time this weekend. It picked up, I'll show you the time slip, 37 on the back end.
Yeah.
That's monster for a 40-something 100-pound car, for a manual. So anyway, he did phenomenally with it, and the car's all in one piece. We throw a lot of alcohol at it. It doesn't lift up the heads, doesn't blow up.
Right. But so if somebody does want to do the 4 nozzles, though.
Then they have to run the larger pump. They have to run the larger pump.
Will that one pump do it, or should they do 2 pumps?
One large pump will do 4 nozzles. But I think that the larger pump and 215s, not the smaller pump, the larger one, and 215s will flow like the smaller one with 3 nozzles. And the larger pump with 3 nozzles will blow right past. The difference is 700 RPMs on the motor, so they can get a lot more. Okay. So those that are making 1,200 horsepower can use the larger pump. Anything that's that heavy.
So do you sell that pump as well as an option?
We do sell it. But that pump,
when you buy the kit, though, it doesn't give you a drop down for it.
Not for that. Okay. Well, the thing is that it's one of those things you keep behind the counter because there's people that need it. Mm-hmm. It's like when you go to CVS, there's stuff behind the counter when people really have a problem. And that's what the large pump is. It's for that purpose. It's to get a lot more fluid and volume into the engine. We have them. They're on the website now, but they're not added on the kit. Somebody can call me, hey, I want to order the kit with the larger pump. Absolutely. No problems. Kind of like the stainless you were mentioning earlier. Yeah. You want stainless? No problem. Whatever somebody wants, we have it. We can deal with it. Well, but not everybody makes 1,200 horsepower.
They don't?
Not yet.
I thought they did. I thought that was that was your entry level. That's where we start, is 12.
That's where we start. I know.
So I've heard you talk before about this much meth for this much power. Is that like a calculation, or how do you come up with that? And does the base fuel matter? Like if I'm running a 93 or 91 or E85, does the amount of methanol matter at that point?
Depends if you're using it for octane supplementation or if you're using it for cooling.
What's the difference between those two?
The difference is that somebody who runs, let's say, 87 octane, 91 octane, like I've done a lot of Subaru kits to Alaska. because all they have is 91 octane. So they're trying to run boost on those cars, and the only way they can get the octane is from putting a meth kit. That's simply said. So they have to run more aggressive meth systems for that particular reason. Your spray out of an M10 nozzle will cool the charge temperature down under a lot of pressure. And usually a single nozzle kit, if you're running E85, is all you need for that. What ends up happening is that they keep on adding horsepower. All of a sudden, like, the fuel system that they have doesn't carry the car. So now we have to run more meth to make up for the fuel system. And then at that point, the meth system is used for cooling and for supplementation of fuel.
Okay. But so is there a certain flow per horsepower, I guess? Is that a way to think of it? Or because
you could probably say that.
You've asked me basically, you're like, hey, if you're making this much power, how much power are you making? Okay, this is what I would suggest for that.
And my mind goes on, you're asking it based on a V8 engine.
Right.
Because that changes if it's a 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder, 8-cylinder motor. It changes on displacement. A 500 cubic inch motor doesn't need as much alcohol to get to a given horsepower as a 300 cubic inch motor does.
Okay, so that's why.
That's it. It's like you can get a 600 cubic inch big block Chevy motor on 87 octane, make 1,000 horsepower, a blink of an eye. But to get that 350 cubic inch motor, that's a whole other animal to try to get that kind of power level from it. So as the motor becomes bigger, it don't have the same octane requirements. It's like an elephant moving something. It doesn't need a back brace to get there. Right, so the meth kit basically becomes like a back brace to get the engine to where you want it to get to.
So if you're on, say, like an E85 setup and you have enough adequate fueling for that, the benefit of methanol is something I think I try to explain it. Maybe I don't explain it the best way.
You're going to get cooling from it.
Well, people, they're like, oh, well, I need to run the 2 nozzles of meth. And I'm like, well, if you have enough fueling so let me break this, make it a little easier. When I do a setup for a guy, if he's not running port, right? I'll say, go ahead and do 215s and we'll adjust the pump and we'll set everything up and we'll get our cooling and our fueling. But when I go to like a port injection setup, I'll tell them, hey, either pull it back to 210s or pull it back to 115. And they're like, well, why do I want to do that? I was like, because now we're trying to just cool everything. We don't need that much fuel, you know? So it's less of something else coming in that you don't need, and you're using it just for that cooling.
There's a caveat to that, is that a lot of these cars now are flex fuel.
Right.
So then the car is on 93 sometimes. And they're on 93 sometimes, and they might be on the highway sometimes, and they might be in Mexico wanting to do a 60 to 130 on 93.
I try to convince my people that are at that level to don't do that. But if they wanted to, those guys would want to keep the 2 nozzles.
Well, they might own a draggy and they want to see the 60 to 130, how it works on the draggy. So they got to test that feature.
Make sure that the draggy's working.
Yeah, make sure the draggy is working, not the car. But then they might run on 93 or a slush of 93 mixed with the 85 to some kind of content in there. And now, if you run 93, you can't run that 1,100 horsepower by itself, irregardless of how many fuel pumps. You can put 3 525s, and it doesn't mean because you have the fuel you can run that. And that's what people have to understand. I'm going to take a step back, and this might help. Use case
of the car, basically.
Maybe I'll give this example. This might help. You take a Buick Grand National. I mean, this is an easy car because it's old technology. It's 3.8. It's good for 15 pounds of boost on pump 93.
Okay.
So why do you say it's only 15 when I can go 16 or 17? Well, what happens is when you go 16 or 17, now it's going to want to knock because that extra 2 pounds of boost, 93 octane, can't handle it. Now you get that same Buick, you drop in some toluene, xylene, some C16, some C12. You drop anything into the gas tank that has a little more octane, all of a sudden we go 16, 20, 22, 25 pounds of boost without having any knock.
Mm-hmm.
I learned to tune on a Buick because they had a little device called the Scan Master, and the Scan Master shows you knock retard. So as long as the knock retard was on 0, you could put the screws to that car. 25 pounds, no knock. Okay, let's go 27. No knock, let's go to 30. No knock, keep on going up. The sky's the limit as long as you don't have knock. If you have any knock, it scatters.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. So if you have enough octane in it, you keep it from scattering. Very simple Buick 101 tuning, no knock. And when you go up on boost, you add more fuel, It keeps it from knocking. It keeps the air fuel where it needs to be. You add boost, you add fuel, boost, fuel, keep them going up. Meth kits are progressive. So they come on a 30-pound 3-bar map sensor. So if you're at 22 pounds, you go to 24, the pump just goes up, whoop, a little more. You go to 26 pounds, the pump goes, whoop, goes a little more. So as you keep on throwing more boost at it, the meth system keeps on getting more and more aggressive. Yet the fueling is the same on those cars. So at 15 pounds of boost, it has the same fuel that it puts on at 28 pounds of boost. But the methanol keeps on increasing, and that's how you keep it from detonating. So the knock reading is all this stuff.
Something I've never thought about is, when I was running the methanol on my car, or let's just say Wendy's car, we'll drive that car with the meth on it at like 12 pounds, and she'll turn it up to 28, and the fueling's always still on. So the methanol must
Keeps
be
ramping up.
Right.
That brings another point we haven't spoken about. So tuning wise, cars that have top mount blowers make boost differently than a car with a centrifugal blower.
Right.
So if you have a Corvette with a ProCharger, ECS, Vortec, Paxton kit, whatever, those cars, to get into boost, you really have to get over 4,000 RPMs to get them spinning fast enough to get boost into them.
Right. Okay.
Yet, if you get one of those cars, you put a big Whipple on it, or a 2650 or something.
Yeah, you got that immediate.
At 2,300 RPMs, you'll have 10 pounds of boost. So the way we trigger those kits is differently.
Yeah,
and that's something
you offer that in 2 different options.
That's correct. That's why we have the mass air trigger and the boost trigger. So somebody who has a top mount blower, like a Roots blower, will do mass air for trigger. That way it regulates based off how much air is going through the blower. Perfect examples of this is somebody with a truck. Mm-hmm. You get a truck with a Whipple.
Because they're heavy and they make that boost quick.
And with a lot of load. So not only we're going to have a truck, a Whipple, let's put a lift kit and let's put some big tires on it.
Because why not?
Why not? That's the American way. This is what we're going to do. But that truck's always in boost. And if you trigger a kit like that off of boost, you're going to go through some
quick.
You're going to call, hey, I need a 20-gallon tank for the bed. I'm going through 10 gallons a day.
Yeah.
Because that's what the call entails. So if we do them off of airflow, I can say, all right, at 8,000 hertz, let's switch the meth kit on. And it takes the car, most cars, you got to put them in third gear, floored above 3,500 RPMs to get to 8,000 hertz.
But that's also adjustable.
That's adjustable. We can come on at 7,000.
That's something we were kind of talking about.
Yes.
This is when people are tuning these meth kits. If you're tuning a customer's car and it has an Alky Control system on it, and you don't know where the box is with the little switch that pulls back on the back,
yeah,
they're doing a half-assed job. That needs to be. You need to adjust that. You need to set that to where when that comes in, you see that boost coming in, you want to go ahead and get it coming on.
Yeah, you don't want it to come on too early.
Right.
Then you're going to go through 20 gallons a day. And you don't want it to come at too late, where now this meth gets coming on at 5,000 RPMs, way past when it's needed.
Right.
You don't want to hear a knock, 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 and then it clears up.
Yeah. Well, and the kit not only adjusts as when it's going to come on, but how aggressively it's going to come on. Right.
Yeah.
So that's something
3 adjustments.
I was telling you, I always get customers that are like, oh, I don't know where that box is. I'm like, well, how did they tune it? Oh, well, they said it was already set. Yes, out the box when you send it, it's pretty close.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be dialing this car in and you're going to do your job the correct way, like we're being paid to do, you need to adjust that box as well. That's very, very important.
If anybody watching this podcast will say, if you have a question, please call. I can't overemphasize it. And if you call and it goes to voicemail, do leave a message. I do call everybody back.
He does call back.
And if it's in a night or weekend, send me an email. I'm always on my phone. I'm always answering. Because if I help you succeed, you help the customer succeed.
Right.
And this industry succeeds.
Well, and there's other people too. Like, if for some reason you couldn't get a hold of him, call me. Even if you're a tuner, we're going to help.
Somebody's going to help.
Somebody's going to help because, again, that's kind of what our mission is this year, that no gatekeeping 2025. If you're a tuner and you have trouble, call me. I'll help. If you don't know how to adjust that meth and you haven't done it, and for some reason he's busy, call me. I'll walk you through it. I'm not going to charge you. I just want to make sure you do it right, because as we were talking, as this industry grows, there's plenty of work for everybody, but everybody needs to be doing their part. Everybody needs to put in, because if you ruin the customer base, then we are all out of work, right? You know, there's too much information out there to not work together on this. Do the right things.
I can't tell you how many times that I get a customer calls me and the first thing he says, I've been reading on this forum, that forum, I've been reading on this situation or that situation, I've been researching for hours, and then I called you.
Right.
You know, they're trying to be set up to call me. I go, they should just call me.
Right.
Call me.
Because you're going to answer the questions.
Yes.
I've called you over, even the littlest thing. I'm like, I'm not 100% sure.
And this way they're not getting all the bias from somebody that might have had a kit from 2008 or 2005. Or might have had a used kit, or might have had a maladjusted kit, or might have had a malinstalled kit, or any of these things, call.
Yeah. And if for some reason somebody, you know, leave a comment if you want me to make a quick video of how to, you know, make these adjustments or something like that. I'll make a video, send it to Julio, make sure that he approves of it. Yeah. And we'll post that out there. We don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
But the whole scariness of a meth kit, I mean, I believe that with the pressure sensor, with the LED, once
Test
you have
button.
that set and you test it, you know.
And maintain it.
That's, I mean, you're dealing with a corrosive liquid at the end of the day.
Yeah. And what happens is the problem with it is that alcohol dries rubber. The pump has rubber parts inside of it. Mm-hmm. Over time, these parts are constantly in contact with, it's like if you put your finger in lemon juice and wait 2 years, you take it out, you're going to be down to the bone.
Unless you're not going to have a finger left.
Exactly. So alcohol is sitting on these rubber parts, constantly touching them. And over time, those pump parts are just going to simply harden. They're going to shrink up a little bit. They're not going to have the same flexibility. They're not going to have the same elasticity. They can't. Over a period of time, they're going to degrade.
And for $85, you can fix that. You know, that's the crazy thing. But I think that was my biggest thing, and my main reason for wanting to sit down with you was to talk about, you know, these meth kits have been around for a very long time. We've used them on big power cars for a very long time. It's all in utilizing it properly. Same thing as any other system. You know, you can put a turbo kit on and you can have a wastegate fail because you didn't maintain it, or didn't put the line on, or you didn't put a clamp on, and kill your engine. But if you do things properly, there are ways. In this age of internet, there is ways to get a hold of people that will help you.
External fuel pumps need to be rebuilt. If it's Aeromotive, if it's Weldon, Barry Grant, or whatever, those pumps, they don't last forever. Yeah. And if you wait until you have a failure from the pump, you're going to be building a motor and rebuilding a pump.
Well, I get people, they're like, oh, well, you know, what if the meth doesn't turn on? I'm like, what if your fuel pump doesn't turn on? You know,
or if your secondary fuel pump doesn't turn on. How many guys run on booster pumps and secondary
I've had that
fueling?
happen, actually.
Of course they do.
But that's what I'm saying is there's ways to do it. And if you really are super concerned and you're like, man, I just want to know, you grab a 300 PSI gauge and hook it up. And if you don't know how to hook it up and you don't want to figure it out, you call. It's that easy.
Actually, I have something that I didn't get a chance to bring. I was going to show. I have, and I learned this from Shop Power Tech. They're in St. Pete.
Well, just talk to that guy.
Yeah,
super
Joe.
Nice guy. Yeah,
Joe. Awesome. What they did was I sold them like a little gauge and a tester. And then one of his techs got the bright idea that they were going to put the gauge on top of a windshield washer jug. You know, like one of those Peak $1 ones, because they hold a gallon in them, you know?
Right.
So I got the idea. I learned from people and their ideas. I'm just going to get a cap. I'm going to start building those tanks, just the gauges. So you can buy the gauge, you can thread it on your own tank, hook up your hose from it, use the test and bleed buttons, test your system under pressure. When you're done, you get the liquid, pour it back in your tank, problem resolved. And that's a cheap tester.
You should have seen, I wish I'd have took pictures of this rig I made with the different nozzles.
I've got videos. So cool. I've got videos.
I had a fuel pressure regulator. I was bringing it up to see where the pressure. Yeah. I had to science it because I was tired of that intercooler that didn't work, and I wanted to figure this stuff out. There's still a few things I want to touch on, and it's late here, and he drove from Tampa for this, so
sorry.
You know, appreciate this
I drive
information.
across the country. Actually, we got to film. We got to do this filming in Puerto Rico. You got to invite me over.
You're always welcome.
I know.
We got a room. Two things I really want to touch on. One is the Corvette deal. We've spoken about this. And I know you've went out of your way to try to mitigate the temperature issue of the tank in the fender, but it is a concern and there is a fix. And I don't know that people really understand the whole deal. I've even spoken about it on another podcast before.
But and another thing too, and like a perfect example, the C7, it's not all of the cars. And
it's all the cars in Texas.
Wait a second.
It's so hot.
You could probably draw a line in the country. And then that line, it also depends on the car. And it depends on the model of C7. And it also depends on the height of the car. Most of the problem that happens is that if the car is slammed, now they have no air going underneath them, which is then one problem, because then you have no way of extracting heat from under the hood. Second problem is that the hoods are not vented. So there's no way for the hot air that's under the hood to escape. So the only place...
But it escapes through the sides, doesn't it?
What if you have a Z06 and you have an oil tank on one of the sides? So now you have one spot that all this monster engine has to escape all the heat from it. Mm-hmm. And it depends how the cars are driven. So we had a customer, he was in Orlando, another shop had installed a kit. He bought the car that way. And when he would drive the car for 2 hours, the tank would get so hot that it would start boiling. And then when it would start boiling, the LED, instead of going red to green, it would flip back and forth, click, 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 or stay red. In other words, we can't build pressure off of a system full of air. Mm-hmm. The fix was we just put a tank in the back, put the pump in the back, took it out of the heat. Voila, problem resolved.
Well, that's what I started doing once you had told me about that, because you sell multiple tanks. There's the one big tank that, and the roof does still fit back there. I checked it. Yeah. And there's also the cubby tank.
The cubby tank is sold by my competitor, ProMeth, and they make one that's molded inside the cubby. The only problem with it is that the pump has to go behind the back bumper cover.
Yeah, that's true.
And then to get to the pump, to change that $85 head, now you're pulling the bumper cover off.
Yeah.
And going through this mess. And most people don't want to pull a bumper cover off of a Z06.
And it's 1 gallon versus 3, right?
Well, it's the ones we have for the back that the top still fits is 2 gallon.
Is it?
The Vortec tank is 2 gallons. We have a 4 gallon too that'll fit back there too, and the top will also clear.
And when you install that, make sure you vent it.
And it's got a vent hose, and that goes outside the vehicle.
Yeah, yeah.
And the kit already comes with a breather vent. And like I said, I've already installed it. I've taken multiple pictures. I make a plate that installs in the back of the car, so the tank goes underneath the carpet. So it'll have 2 little studs that go through the carpet. You put the tank down, you put the hold down clamp on it, the pump goes in the cubby. So if you ever need to service it, the pump's inside the cubby. Yep. You don't have to go underneath the car. And if you have one of the Corvette tanks, like the ice tanks and stuff, it doesn't interfere with that ice tank because it's in the cubby area too. So this is ahead of the cubby and it solves the problem. But it's on the website.
I think a lot of people don't know that was an issue, because a lot of people don't know that meth boils at 148.
160, yeah, it boils at 160. But again, if you're watching the light, you can tell if there's a problem or not.
People don't do that.
If they're not watching the light, if they're not using the test button, if they're not watching air fuel, if it goes all this, if you're blind to the car.
That's what we have to assume that people aren't going to look at that. So that's what
the light should be ground zero. The flickering light, the LED should be there.
These customers, God bless them, but some of them don't look at anything, and they barely look at the road ahead.
I'm not even going to say that I put a supercharger in my car. I don't even have a boost gauge.
Yeah, well,
I can hit on that one, and that's like, when I had the Buick, the first thing that was put a boost gauge. Well, how much boost does it make it? I want to guess. I want to see a little needle. $30 gauge. I had a friend of mine used to use a tire pressure gauge, because he would and he would reset, and you don't know how much boost he'd make. A $10 gauge would do it.
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be very fancy, but a boost gauge will tell you if a belt's slipping. If you have a problem, the car doesn't feel right. What's going on? Is it making 8 pounds of boost? Is it making 10 pounds, 12 pounds?
But the people that could have this issue, they could also mitigate the issue, even though I know it's already hot in the tank, right? At least purging that system before you make these long rips. Because I've seen, when I had first called you about it, we'd make a hit and all the way through the first gear was lean. And then when it got to the next gear, the meth finally just made it
from not purging it. I understand. But at that point, it probably was boiling at some point, got some air, and it finally cleared itself out.
Right.
But
the tank in the back, you'd still want to purge it because your tank's in the rear, but you have a lot less chance of that meth being hot.
Oh,
because it's in the cabin with you.
Right. I mean, if the cabin's 160 degrees, you're probably...
No, I know. I guess what I'm getting at is just making sure that these people understand, like, yes, the C7 kit comes with it in the washer tank and it does function. And there is a way to try to make sure that is working properly.
Yes.
But that fluid is hot.
Yes.
And it's going to be hot no matter what.
Yes.
So when you order the C7 kit, get it in stainless. Don't be a peasant. Get it in stainless because you already bought the Corvette, and then get a tank in the back. And it doesn't really take any. It literally sits right behind the seat. You don't even know it's there.
You could put the top on the car still and everything back there.
But something
and get the billet cap. That way it's easy to thread on, and you can put a big funnel in there. It's easy to pour into the car. And you're not having to fight with an aircraft
Luckily,
cap.
if you spill it, it just evaporates anyways.
It evaporates. Well, I just throw a towel, get an old towel, throw it around the bumper and stuff, and just pour it in there, and you're done.
Something I get asked a lot. They're like, man, I don't want to have to fill this meth all the time. Maybe we want to explain. It's not like that.
The kit only activates. So let's say you had a C7 Z06 and you with a top mount blower, you did upper, lower pulleys. The only way the kit activates is you got to be like in really under load, like high first gear, middle of second gear, third gear. You have to be that the air is going so much through the kit to activate it. Plus, once the kit activates, it starts spraying, let's say 4 volts on the pump. So the pump just not very fast. It's just getting some liquid out, making 50, 60 pounds of pressure. By the time you're at, 6, 8, 10, 12 volts, it's moving more. A single M15 nozzle will probably flow about an ounce a second at wide open. So if you do a 10-second quarter mile pass, 10 ounces of liquid you will consume on a single nozzle kit. If your tank holds 250 ounces,
right. That's what I try to explain.
But if you're driving the car like a maniac, you're on a poker run and you're constantly going into boost, blast, 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 you will go through meth. And hey, you will also go through fuel like crazy. I was going to say
though, if you check it every time you fill your tank up.
And you can also tell with the rear tanks, because of the float switch, as the tank starts going low, like you hit the brakes and the liquid
you'll see that red light come on.
That light will kind of blink at you. And the more aggressive the light blinks at you, the lower the tank is. So if you corner and the light kind of blinks at you a little bit, it'll tell you how it is. My mom used to have a 64 Impala, and the gas would be at a quarter tank. And as soon as I would take off from a light, it would go to empty and come back up.
I've seen that.
And then I could tell how much gas she had in the car by looking at that fuel gauge moving. And that's an example of something so simple. And it was great. I mean, that's an example of the low level. People with the Buick said, I don't like the light flashing so much. Okay, so I made a 5-second delay. So unless the tank is low for 5 seconds, the light doesn't come on. And then the next complaint was, hey, now when it comes on, it's too late. The thing is like too low. So you can't have it both ways. We've all been there. I'm just saying this is not that it is.
But if you just maintain the level in your tank,
listen,
you don't have to rely on a light.
Honestly, if I'm going to erase my car, my oil's full, my gas tank's full, my meth tank's full, power steering's full, brake fluid's full, all my fluids are full, period.
Well, and you could carry, I usually tell people, you can carry a gallon of meth, just don't fill the container all the way up. That way you have room for expansion if it gets hot in your car.
You know what some of the Subaru guys would do? I learned this from them. They can buy a bottle of heat. The little yellow bottles, those are 98% methanol.
I've done that in a pinch.
Wait. But what they do is they carry 6 or 8 of those bottles stuffed in the quarter panels of the cars, like in the trunks, like the little bottles already sealed up from Walmart. So if they get into a pinch, they just crack.
We were trying to race her car one night, and we bought 3 Walmarts worth of heat just to fill her tank up because we wanted to race and we couldn't find any methanol. But for the guys that want to use windshield washer fluid, don't do that.
No.
Because I'm sure you've seen it, but that dye and that bullshit will clog the pumps.
It'll clog the filter or get into it, or you're running a dye through there for no reason, and don't put dye in it.
Well, and it's not pure methanol either.
And that water, when you add it to the alcohol, it really makes it corrosive. You want to see a bomb, get some alcohol with some water in it, it really gets corrosive. Not to say the word bomb that way, but I'm just saying that I've seen some stuff really get corrosive, and it's from people running mixes of water. Because that water mixed with the alcohol, it really accelerates the corrosion. It's a funny thing. I can get a piece of steel, put methanol around it, and no problem. I get methanol and water, that piece of steel instantly rusts right up.
You got kind of dry and wet, right?
It's funny stuff.
Yeah. But so the main things we would touch on, right? Check your pressures when you're setting these things up. Tune it using the tools that he gave you. He gave you a box that has adjusters in it. If you're not adjusting that, you're not doing your job.
If there's a question,
call. Please
or
just
email.
call.
I'm not a guy that's hard to get a hold of, you know. But I am I get people that I see the phone. Sometimes I'm doing something and it rings. They don't leave a message and they call and they call and they call and they call. And I don't know. This might be spam.
But there's another outlet. Call me. You can Google my phone number.
But if you don't pick up, they got to leave you a message.
The Google brings up Wendy's phone number. But that's what I'm saying. Just reach out. You know, forums are great. They did a lot of good. But you remember that man, every time I look on like a forum thing, it's like, oh, from 2015. I'm like, bro, that was 10 years ago. Just call and ask. You know, if you want something a little different, he'll make it. I've never had an issue with getting something made.
I've made kits for pontoon boats with Whipples on them and, you know, LS motors. I've made kits for airplanes. I've made kits for motorcycles. I have a local customer, Frank. He brought me a Goblin. I don't know if you ever seen one of those things.
I don't even know what that is.
It's like a little 2-seater car with a cobalt supercharged engine.
Oh, kind of like an Aero Atom or something?
Yeah, like an Aero Atom, like that. Yeah. I put a meth kit on his. You know, that's, like I said, I make kits for anything. It doesn't really matter what it is. If it's got boost or forced induction, that's it. There's a couple other touch-ups. I do these things also for normally aspirated. Like
I was about to ask you about NA.
Your guys like with the C6, perfect cars for that. They'll make a car 427, 13.5 to 1 compression. They got to run pump. They don't have access to E. Put a meth kit, run it off of airflow.
Yeah.
Perfect. Problem resolved. Other cars, Mustangs, Hellcats, and I know they don't go into the GM stuff that you do. A lot of the like Hellcats and TRXs and stuff, they're wideband controlled. They're the easiest car to put a meth kit on. You spray, the computer pulls fuel and auto-tunes for it. As long as the computer doesn't have to add fuel, you have carte blanche, ready, hit it and go. It'll pull 30% fuel and at the top of the gear, put 5% fuel. So you can put a pulley, this and that, they auto-tune themselves. Mustangs, the Coyote motors, wideband control. Another car that auto-tunes itself. And I don't know why there's not more meth kits put on Fords. But there's a stigma with Ford because other systems, plastic lines and everything else that have eroded confidence in those applications.
That's what it is it's got to be these other systems that are making people nervous. Because, I mean, look, if I've had an issue, any product that I have an issue with, I will always reach out to the manufacturer. And you know this because I've done it several times. I'm like, hey, I'm seeing this. I'm not really sure. And you'll walk me through it and let me know. But I'm assuming that people have had either they didn't want to call and figure it out, or they've had these other systems with the plastic lines or something like that, and they've had failures. And, you know, most of it that I see is just wiring issues, the install issues, or they're not tuned properly. So when you hit it, it just, you know, blah, and then it goes. Or you'll have them where you hit it and it's super lean and then it comes on. And I think that's something that it's not really an issue, right? I mean,
it's not an issue if it's set up properly.
So
same thing with the knobs, you know, the one that goes 1 through 8.
Yeah.
I get customers that the shop sets the knob on 2. And then the kit's lazy.
Why would you want that on 2 versus 8?
Because they don't want to tune the car for meth, and I don't know why. And then the kit's lazy. It doesn't want to build pressure. It doesn't want to make, instead of saying, hey, we have a car, really don't want to run this much alcohol in. I'd like to see if there's a better fix. So I go, why don't you just take that 15 nozzle out, put a 5.
Yeah.
Since you don't want to run meth
That's what I was wondering,
because that was your decision.
You want to maintain the pressure still.
We want to maintain pressure. You want to atomize. You want all this stuff.
Right.
But instead of having the knob down to 2 where you're having so little alcohol put in, why don't you just put a smaller jet in it? You can turn the knobs up. Now you get atomization. The kit builds pressure fast. It gets signal fast. Everything works better. Now the customer has a car that the knob's set on 2, and then a month later I get a call, hey, the light's staying red. It's not going green anymore because the knob's turned all the way down and the system's simply not making enough pressure.
That's something I think is big. That's a big thing that people are having issues with.
I have that all the time, but instead of the shop calling, hey, I'm having to run this knob all the way down to 2 because this is where we want it at, I would tell them, hey, listen, why don't you just switch the meth kit on that box. Instead of having you come on, let's say, 3 pounds of boost, why don't you come on at 6 pounds of boost? It's moving more air. We can run a higher knob setting at 6 pounds of boost, so it won't impact their fuel as much, and the kit wakes up and builds pressure better. But no, they don't want to touch the box. They're coming on a little early. So they turn the knob down because that's the fastest one they have for turning it down.
Right, and then that's not the fix.
That is not the fix.
That's all.
The only thing that does is it kicks the can down the road, and then the customer then has a light that's not changing green because it's red on line. Light's supposed to go red to green, and it doesn't. So then I got a problem with the system because somebody simply didn't set it up or made a phone call. And somebody, I don't know, I don't understand in the industry. When you have a problem, contact the manufacturer. If you have a problem with the clutch, call the clutch manufacturer. Got a problem with the fuel system, call the fuel system manufacturer. Got a problem with the camshaft, call the cam manufacturer. Got a problem with your meth kit, call the meth manufacturer. Yeah. Have them try to help you. If they can't help you, you've exercised your due diligence. But when I'm not getting calls for people having questions, I'm assuming that everybody is and everything is perfect until it's not. And then I'm playing catch up and clean up on aisle 3 for problems that are happening.
Right. So it's all avoidable.
Completely. Totally.
But that's a big thing is make sure that they have pressure. Make sure all of this works off of atomization. Atomization of the methanol works better. Making sure that you have the pressures, that it's coming on at the right time, that it's feeding the right amount.
Yeah.
And all of that is super adjustable, which is the issue I have with all these other kits is when it's just nothing, wall. Can't do that either.
You can't.
Then I'm having to go to the math and just rip a whole bunch out. So I'm like, well, that's weird. I just lost 200 foot-pounds of torque. Well, the trans doesn't like that. Nothing likes that. So with the methanol kits, I'll see that too. I'm like, hey, I'm having to dip this. If you're having to dip the math curve, you don't have that box adjusted right, because I've never had to have a dip because that kit is so well adjusted.
Linear. Yes.
Right. So that's something, if you're having that, make sure, call. If they don't get a hold, call me. I'll help you through that.
Send us emails, send us phone calls, leave messages. If those that don't leave messages, my box has never been full the last 15 years. My voicemail box has not ever been full. My email box has never returned from undeliverables because you can't get a hold of me. I try to do this because it is my job, my passion to get these systems working as it is, as an enthusiast, as somebody using the kit. We're a small American business. The parts that we can get made in the U.S., we get them made in the U.S. The pumps are made in the U.S. The pressure switches are made in the U.S. Our lines are all made in the U.S. You know, whatever I can get manufactured in the U.S., I will get manufactured in the U.S. Our cabling, wiring, all that stuff is. I can get it cheaper elsewhere in the Orient and in Asia, but I choose not to because I want the quality and I want that stuff to stay here. And I'm not trying to say a USA first thing. I'm just trying to say is that I love the quality of the stuff that comes out of this country.
I mean, I will. You should buy your USA stuff.
I did. This is it. We support the country and we support this. I can't buy resistors in the U.S. I can't buy capacitors in the U.S. because there's no manufacturers that make them here yet. When they do, we'll change our tune accordingly for that too as well. So semiconductors and stuff like that are used, but we hand assembled. The PC boards are made in the U.S. So we don't get them from China. They're not built externally somewhere. We hand assemble all this stuff. It's all triple, quadruple, quintuple tested before it goes out. Every single box.
You must have a pretty good quality control because, like I said, I've never had one.
We got multiple hands. So we have one person building, one person testing, and one person QC. We have all this stuff repeats the same process. So as soon as something is ordered and done, that unit goes through that barrage of tests again. That way, when it comes out of the box, it's been triple, quadruple, quintuple tested. And it's not something that we just built and throw. Because if not, somebody gets it to install it and now they got a problem. And to mitigate problems, the best way is from having 22 years of learning, 22 years of failure, 22 years of knowledge. This is how we do it. We have to keep all this stuff this way. Right. Our filters, all that stuff's American made. As much as we can get. Yep. Sometimes some pump fittings that are brass, those are offshore. I know you do.
I'm a peasant, but I like my stainless.
I love the stainless too.
I guess,
even though it's sometimes a pain to get. Lately, it's been crazy, man.
I
Oh my
tell
God.
everybody, I'm
I
like,
mean,
I'm
the
like, just get it in
last-
stainless. You'll like it.
It is February of 2025. My biggest hurdle now has been the increases across the board on everything. You know, and it's not seen. It's I'm getting nickel and dimed every month by somebody, some supplier on something, and it's
But the meth kits are not really nearly as expensive as people think they
because
are either.
well, I've been smarter because instead of buying 10 of something, I try to buy 100. Instead of buying 100, I try to buy 1,000 to keep inventory. And that's where I can keep the price where I'm not having to constantly jack up. It would be simpler if I bought 10 of this when I needed only 10. And then that way I can manage the cost and stuff like that.
What's an average meth kit cost? Another reason I ask that is because just so people kind of, if they were too lazy to go to the website and check, and they're watching this, they can see
Camaro, Corvette, single nozzle kit, $700-800, $700.
Right. So instead of having to buy, and I still think that you should get the port injection if you need the port injection and all of that, which can also control that. If you really needed to, you can control it with your port setup as well. But that is 3 times as much as the meth kit that you can get to get you going. I think
some people
that's
don't.
really
Somebody's
cheap
happy
for
with
what you're going to
700,
get out of it.
But if somebody's happy with 700-800 horsepower, there are customers that are happy with
No,
that.
they're not.
Well,
They
for
just
now,
don't know
they
better.
start there.
Mm-mm.
They start.
We start at 4 digits. That is the way of the world.
That's the way. That's it. That is the way.
If you don't make 1,000, you ain't shit. What? I'm just saying. Yeah. Anyway.
Nowadays, I mean, something that would get your blood pressure up. I understand all that. If your knuckles are not wide when you're done, flooring the car, you're just not making enough power. I understand that. But if you didn't see the fear of God.
But what I always tell people, I'm like, look, you can go to E85, right? On the boosted cars, you can make, if you're making 600, you can go E85 and make 700. We can get, from what I've seen on 93, 60-70% of that pretty easily, and maybe more. I just don't go that far. I guess I'm a little more comfortable on E85 as a base, and I will admit that's from lack of really pushing on methanol because
Well, another thing,
but I'm still picking up 60-70 wheel
on your question of
for
E85,
$700.
right? What's the 15?
Oh shit, 87 octane.
Maybe.
Yeah, but
So we have a meth kit right there.
I get that argument, but the amount of power and dumb shit I've done on E60
I know
is unbelievable. Now I did recently dyno my car on E50 and without any changes went to 75 because people were like, oh, there's no difference. Yeah, there was 70 wheel difference. So you can argue with whoever you want to.
Listen,
that happened.
It is octane, and the more octane that you can give the car, the more power benefit that you can get.
But what I'm getting at is for me to go from that pump gas at say 900 or 700 to go to that 800 or 900 is $3,000, $2,500. Or I can throw a meth kit on there as long as I check everything properly, make sure I have my pressure and my nozzle set right and my controller set right. I can make 60 to 70% of what I was going to make for $700.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you can still use it when you go port.
Yeah.
So if you want to run 93, like you said, even though I tell my customers, please don't make 4 digits and try to race 6130 on 93. But you can if your Alky setup is right. And that is a average of $700, probably 8 or 9 if you get the stainless fittings. Do that.
Yeah.
But anyways,
and they get a trunk tank.
Trunk tank for sure. I'm telling you, I'm pushing people to that because I don't want. After I saw that thing go lean, I'm like, oh god, that's scary as hell. And I know that customer didn't see it. I know he didn't because he logged it like that several times. But all this is avoidable. The whole thing that meth is scary. I hope that you watch this and you understand that it's your fault. Did I say that right? He's given you the tools to do it right. He's given you the tools to know what to look for. If you don't know what to look for, he has a phone that he will answer. Just make sure that you ask. Make sure that you set this stuff up right. And meth is perfectly safe. If you do have that dip in your MAF curve and your meth doesn't turn on, you are in trouble. But that's because you didn't tune it right from the get-go.
or set up the controller right, or did something right, or didn't get the air out of the system. Bleeding these systems is important, but the light usually will tell you when they're not bled. The light's going to go red and it's not going to go to green. It's going to stay red when they're. If I get a brand new kit right now, I install it on a car. I hook up all the hoses, tighten up everything, put liquid into the tank, start the car up, hit test. That light's going to stay red and it's not going to go green. Doesn't matter how long I hold test.
Right.
And some guys will want to hold that test for 2 minutes. Yeah. Not understanding that if it doesn't do it like this, we got a problem.
Yeah, ain't nobody got time for that.
Nobody got. But if you take the hose off, you bleed it, put the hose back on, start the car, hit test, kabang, red to green instantly. Yep. So if you run the tank empty because you're not filling it,
you need to bleed it.
You need to rebleed it. But then also, as soon as you pour the alcohol in, your light's not going red to green because your test button is there. The test is like a purge on a nitrous kit. You see enough drag races that somebody pulls up and they're like, psh, psh, psh. They're putting the purge or getting the air out. The test button does the same thing. You do it when the car's running at a high idle, and you can purge the kit that way. And if that purge doesn't get the light to go red to green, then that should be, okay, let me stop for a second. What's going on here? Is there air maybe still trapped into it? Is something not right? Is there a problem with the pump? Is there a problem with the switch? Is there a problem with something?
And hitting the skinny pedal is not going to fix that problem.
Everybody always, I blasted all the way up to 7,000 RPMs at 20 pounds of boost and the light's staying red. I'm like,
I know, I get that.
You have a test button, push it. What's so hard?
Yeah.
I have this story I tell a lot of my customers. I have an old customer that has an old Cessna airplane. When he gets into the cockpit, he checks the magneto before he goes up in the air. Your test button is your magneto test. And this is how you know your airplane's going to work at 10,000 feet. Because if you're not testing your plane before you go up, then your results may vary.
Yeah.
And as simple as that is, test button is there to set you free. If the test button doesn't work, don't beat on the car. It doesn't mean you can't drive the car. You can drive across the country without a meth kit. You can shut the meth kit off if you need it to.
That's the other thing, yeah. Is people are like, oh, well, what if I run out of meth? Well, you drive your car like a civilized human being.
Yeah, right. Just don't go up on boost. Don't race it.
Yeah.
If your car's weak, if your belt's shredding, you don't race it. You can start it, maybe drive it. You shouldn't.
But people still do. So basically, if you're in traffic and you're with your old lady and a car pulls up next and they wink, as soon as they wink at you or blink at you or anything, go ahead and hit that. Just be ready. If you got to peel his muffin cap back, you're ready.
You want me to know another way I used to test the kits without hitting the test button? I'd put the car like in second gear and I'd open up the throttle. I would activate it and whop the throttle a little bit just to activate it a couple of times. Then I'd watch it go red to green. And I'd be lazy and I didn't have to push the button. It's like on a turbo car. Another kid activates at 7 pounds. Yeah. I just go bring the boost up to about 7 to 10 pounds, hold it there. And as soon as I see the light go green, stomp on it. And I'm gone. Too. Like a slingshot.
Yeah. the biggest thing is just making sure you're testing.
Making sure it's working. Watch the lights. The lights are there. The lights will set you free. Wideband. Meth kit, you're ready to go.
Are we okay? Okay.
I think so.
So one more thing I want to ask is, what if you put M5 in there?
You can get more power from the car with M5. The only question that exists is the life of that $85 pump head.
I was going to say that. So, because I've had people ask me about it. I haven't done it yet, but I won't say that I don't have some laying around.
If you're on top of your game with tuning and your car is at that limit where
I got a good guy. He does all right.
And you've already figured out the meth kit. You've already set up everything. Everything is working perfect on it. And now you hit a wall on power and you're trying to get that extra 20 or 30 horsepower. M5 will do it. Mm-hmm. But understand that.
What do they need to, are you going to tell them what they need to adjust to add that M5 or just throw that M5 in?
You could just drain the kit, put M5 in it. Use the test button and bleed. Take the hose, drain it, bleed the M5 in, hook up your nozzle and hit it and go. But if the M5 starts becoming aggressive and damaging the pump, you're going to see that light's not going to go red to green like it did with the other alcohol.
Indication.
And any change, indication. Any indication that's any change, time to throw another head in it.
Just keep a head in the trunk. It's like when these Chinese 102 throttle bodies came out, and people are like, well, the Nick Williams is so expensive. I'm like, it's cool, man. No problem. Buy that Chinese throttle body, but buy 2. Keep one in the trunk. They're like, well, what if it doesn't? No, it will. When it fails, you can throw that one on. And then after you're tired of buying those,
Buy a Stanley toolkit with a 102 millimeter. Buy a Stanley toolkit from Amazon with a 102 millimeter from China.
Right.
And if you have a problem, you can go ahead and swap it real fast.
But for $85, just like if you have a Pro Charge car, you know you keep an extra belt and tools, right?
You never know.
Keep an extra pump head, $85, no problem.
You go in across country, keep an extra belt.
But for the guys that have asked, if you can just throw M5 in there, you can, but you need to understand that M5 is corrosive.
M5 is a lot more aggressive because it's got petroleum in it. And the petroleum content is what damages the head of the pump because the rubbers that are inside of it are rated for alcohol, not for petroleum. So that little extra petroleum content basically kills it. A few years ago, I had these guys from Ignite sent me a drum of E98, see if we could use that. And within a month, the pump shit the bed, simply said. Because
so
at 2%.
What if they're going to the race? Should they throw in the M5 and then utilizing the 2 buttons and the bleed method, pull the M5 back out?
Put regular methanol back in?
Right.
That might live. Again, if you have a spare head, it's no problem.
What about some kind of lubricant? Like I know on M1 they'll use a lubricant. Is that something maybe you would suggest that people use?
The pumps don't need a lubricant. I've had customers, my guys in Alaska, they swear by clots. They put a little cap full of clots into their alcohol. And they say that the pumps last many years and they're getting great results out of it. But if I have 15 people that are having good result with that, I can't make that 40,000 people.
But will it hurt anything?
No.
I know some people have said that if you put a lubricant in the methanol, that it's not good, that it can mess with the methanol. But
if it's a synthetic lubricant, I don't think it's a problem. The problem is if it's a petroleum lubricant.
Okay, so just make sure that you
it's
get
like
a synthetic.
Some rubbers, like you have 3 EPDM, Buna, and Viton. There are 3 rubbers. And one's rated for fuel and oil, one's rated for alcohol. The problem is when you get that fuel, oil, and alcohol mixed together. And this is the problem with most fuel systems, tanks, lines, and everything else, is that a line rated for gasoline, you can't run E85 into it because it'll dry up the line, harden it, and crack it, and smell and stink up, and your garage stinks up because the rubber is not designed for it. And rubbers that are designed for handling alcohol-based fuels and gasoline, petroleum-based fuels, those lines get to be real expensive.
Yeah.
You've seen that, what I mean.
Yep.
And that's why everybody goes with PTFE lines, because they're plastic lines. Unfortunately, plastic is not, you can't make a pump out of plastic parts. It would be nice, but you can't, you need a rubber portion in it for flexibility, diaphragms,
right,
and valving. It just is. And the price point that exists on these pumps, as inexpensive as they are, it's $85 to replace the head. Maybe we could get a pump, somebody could make a pump that would last 10 years. That would be great, but they'd probably charge $1,500,
right,
you know, for something that we can sell for a couple $100 and replace the head every 2 or 3 years. Again, this is your 85 millimeter, your throttle body.
Yeah.
Scenario.
Yeah.
If you service it, you're on top of it. Little more in depth, get a gauge. A little more intense. And if you need that or need help with that, call us. We can help you with it.
Yep. I think we've covered pretty much everything.
Yeah. Update those pumps. I got too many guys every day, man. It's like everybody's in here. They think that because it's only got 400 miles on a car that they don't have to change the pump. And they bought the pump 6 years ago, 7 years ago. The car's been sitting in a body shop for 3 years. And now the first thing they want to do is hammer on the car once they get it out of the body shop. I'm like, no, service all the stuff, from nose to tail. Change all the fluids, bring everything up to speed, test every system on the car, then progressively keep on increasing all your power levels, and the cars are fine. They stay together. But if you do an off the trailer, go down the track without testing, without purging, without checking, without anything, your results may vary.
Yeah.
Considerably. And then the tuner, the alcohol guy, the engine guy, the builder guy is all going to get blamed on this.
I feel like I'm being finger pointed because Wendy's pump is 7 years old.
Yeah. Time for a new pump.
We will get there.
We'll get 'em.
What about future? Is there anything that you're looking to get into, or are we just kind of just?
I think my next
expanding on
move that I
this?
wanted to get into is, you know, getting more testers and more knowledge out. The second thing I'd like to start messing with, and I was speaking with Kaizen Speed, is that boost controller that they're doing.
Yep.
Possibly we could tie the pressure switch into something like that to make it like an increased fail-safe for those top mount blowers. So that way we can keep the boost down if there's no green light. from the meth kit. And that would be a cool one right now to come up with.
I'd bet we could do that with the port controllers too, though.
Probably could do that too.
Because so all of my boost is controlled by the port controller.
Yes.
And it's also controlled by ethanol content.
Yes.
So as the ethanol goes down, the boost comes down.
Right. So we could probably
do that off of another switch as well.
Yeah, or probably just have like a relay or something that introduces a value. That value is there till the light goes solid green. At least when the light goes solid green, the meth kit's working, then go ahead and start opening up your boost. And that's an easy one. I mean, this is $10 stuff.
But that's something simple that these port controller guys will do. They'll add this in. So we'll talk more about that off of here.
I know. But anyway, just letting you know, we never stop thinking. This is just hot rodding. You got something and it just always needs improving upon.
Yeah. But
I mean, right now
always improves everything.
I can say this. I've left everything alone that I can leave alone on my systems. Right now, I'm not changing anything because things are not being returned. Things are not having a problem. My phone is pretty quiet, which is pretty cool. And for problems and for situations and stuff like that, aside from old kits, used kits, people buying stuff secondhand or whatever, that's the majority of calls and question marks and emails with pictures and stuff. But all that stuff gets handled one at a time. But since we're not having things returned, I don't like this is not working right or whatever, I've left everything well enough alone. Believe it or not, I've been buying all my parts for the stuff from the same places for 22 years. I'm kind of
really good.
It's kind of like saying I make a sandwich. I figured out where I like the ham from. I buy from the same place. Yeah. I like this cheese from this one. We buy from this place because it works. Nobody gets upset tummies. That's where we have to get it from.
I know I keep saying one more thing, but
that's all right. Go ahead. We're here.
Sorry. I just want to touch on basically the guys that want to do the 8 nozzles in the lids.
Yes.
Or, pre-turbo meth or something like that. I know you would support all of that, right? But is there an advantage of pre-supercharger or post-supercharger? Let's start with that one real quick, because I know a lot of people say that the methanol washes the coating off the rotors. I've heard it. I'm not saying I know it. I'm just
alcohol flashes at 70 degrees and it leaves no residue behind. So as soon as you spritz it out, it's atomized out. By the time it crosses the throttle body, it's already in gas form. It does nothing to your rotors. Now water, and that's where all the problem with Whipple and Magnuson and everybody else, because everybody's using windshield washer fluid and spraying through the blowers. And what always happens is that the water, when it squeezes through the rotors, gets pushed out and gets into the bearings. It takes out the bearings, rotor to rotor, and now it frags the blower.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, okay.
That's why we don't use water through blowers.
But is there a benefit pre or post, or
there is a benefit? There's a benefit on both of them. If you go pre-blower, because the air is denser, now you make a little more boost. It cools the rotors down too, and the case too, so that helps too. Cools the case down as well. Look at any alcohol dragster or whatever that, you can see their cases they basically get iced up when they're in the staging lanes.
Yeah.
From running methanol through them. That's an example of that. Going post-blower, now you're basically addressing the heat coming off the blower. So that would be an advantage. But the problem is a lot of intake manifolds and setups, that becomes too hard to do. Ultimately.
Well, and you're fighting the pressure that's on the other side of that nozzle.
That's the other thing. You're fighting that pressure because now you got 20 pounds. So if your system makes 100,
that's 80. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, you can get a pump that'll basically overcome that, and that's not a problem. But that's it. There are applications that might merit that. A ZR1, like a 2011. That's an example. You could put a couple nozzles inside the bottom and then, inside the lid, inside the intake manifold. And something like that we've done before too. Some Texas mile cars and things like that.
Right.
And that helps because you're basically cooling the air that's coming into the motor.
Now, would you have to do 8 nozzles for distribution? Or
we've just done, like on those, just 2. That's an example.
Like in the top middle?
Actually on the bottom, because they're on the intakes, on like ZR1. Remember, the air goes down. Right. Not on the top. Or like CTSVs, they have lids. Right. I've seen where we've put 2 on the tops. We've also seen where people have put 8, on them as well. And that's their choice. It's just the plumbing becomes a nightmare. And the only thing I dislike about it is that it's now 16 points, more points for a leak to happen, fitting problem, something didn't get tightened, some kind of issue or something like that. If it's a Texas mile car, I understand.
Yeah.
And the same car's got a Braille battery and other things that's, it's for one purpose. For a street car that somebody's always wrenching on and working on and doing this, I'd probably say all that complication is not needed. And we've seen too many 1,000 horsepower cars that have just pre-throttle body nozzles, and it's worked great. As far as your pre-supercharger, it's okay as long as there's no blow-off valve to sneeze alcohol and there's no mass air meter.
Right, because you don't want to spray that.
Yes.
If you remember that it does this. So if your mass air is right here, and I know there's airspeed, but if it hits that mass air, I can tell you it is a nightmare.
You're the tuner, you know what's going to happen. The mass air is junk. It's done. One more item of note, because some people think that they can then tune everything off of mass air. You can't do a centrifugal blower with mass air if it's in the charge pipe and trigger the meth kit. The reason for that is that if that charge pipe pops off the throttle body, that mass air meter gets pinned because full air is going through it. That meth kit is going to spray full boogie.
Oh, that's a good thing to think about.
This is why I'm mentioning this right now. Yeah. That's why cars that have Sentry blowers are done.
Needs to be
boost based. Yes.
Yeah.
So as soon as you pop the pipe, you lose all the boost. The meth kit shuts off.
If not, you just made a flamethrower.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah, it's a Darwin moment.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
So that's the problem with doing off of mass air tuning. It's great for a top mount blower, but it's not great for a Sentry blower or a turbo. On a turbo application, probably, because as soon as you pop the pipe, it's going to lose boost anyway.
Yeah.
So that's not a problem. But on a ProCharger or a Vortec or Paxton or any other Powerdyne or any other kind of centrifugal blower, the engine spinning 5,000 RPM, that thing is like a giant leaf blower.
Yeah, I've never thought about that one, but yeah, I'm picturing it now. I'm like, oh, that would be really cool looking for a second.
I don't know. I don't want to be on that side of the fence.
What about pre-turbine, like spraying into the compressor housing?
If you know blow off and no mass air,
that's the other thing. Keep in mind that if you're spraying it into the turbo, and you'd have to have a spraying it into if you're spraying it into a ProCharger or a Sentry blower, and you have a mass or blow off valve that's typically open, that's another flamethrower.
Yeah.
But I've seen
you're not going to have a flame. It's just going to sneeze an enormous amount of alcohol out of it.
I was going to say, but I've seen people put it into the turbos. They just, I guess, don't
have a blow off valve.
So I did it on my blue car, but I waited until 20 something pounds of boost. I had to fashion into a hob switch and it worked. Okay. But at 20 something pounds of boost, it would spray methanol in and it would drop my intake temps pretty drastically. I was 300 degrees coming in and it would drop out almost 200 of that before the intercooler.
Well, and again, this is depends as long as you got a problem that when you lift, your throttle body shuts and there's liquid in the pipe, where is this liquid going to? So if there's a blow off, bypass valve or something, then we have that issue. I've had some customers, even with blow-off valves, what they'll do is they'll put a sock over the top of the blow-off valve. So if it sneezes a little, it'll basically wet it and evaporate. I'm not recommending that at all, but I've seen that as one of the little fixes, or where they can recirc the blow-off valve back into the intake. Okay. So if it sneezes, anything can go into that. But
I had mine at wide open and 20 pounds.
I've also seen where it's beneficial because the air becomes denser. It changes the compressor map.
That's what I was told.
Yes.
I didn't gain anything that I could tell, but
you weren't out of the compressor, but you weren't out of compressor map.
Yeah.
So if you have 1,000 horsepower turbo and you're making 1,000 horsepower, you're fine. But if you're making 1,100 horsepower with 1,000 horsepower turbo, that turbo is so far off the map because it's no longer efficient anymore. If you make the air denser,
you're bringing it back in.
Yes, you got it. Perfect example would be like a Nissan, like a GTR with factory turbos. Right. Now you've maxed out the potential out of it. If you spray right before the turbochargers, now you can make them denser and you can create a little more extra power. It's like oil going from 20 weight to 40 weight. Now you can build a little more oil pressure.
Yeah.
Because you made it denser.
Right. Okay. That's definitely a good one to think about there.
There you go.
I think we've covered all my one more things. That was good. That was a lot of info.
I like it.
Which I knew
think
this was going to
it's-
happen, so I was excited. That's why I was
It's
like,
okay.
I
And
told
I'm glad
Wendy,
to be
like,
here.
I've gotta
I'm glad
hit
to
him
be
up.
here. You guys are in tune with the GM platform.
Mhm.
Majority of our business is all GM. We focused only on GM.
But you
because
do
it's the
cover.
majority. I cover everything, but the reason I don't put other manufacturers up on my website for ready-made kits is because for some reason it's not the same. There's no symbiosis on it. An example, like with the Ford customers, one guy's got a centrifugal blower, another guy's got a top mount, another guy's got twin turbos, another guy's got the cars are always all different. They're all over the place. With the GM stuff, the stuff stays the same. So it's easy. You can buy a kit, put it on the car. It's already figured out. It's been around forever. I mean, I've been making the C5 kits since 2004, the C6 kits since 2005, C7 kits have been around now since 2014. That's 11 years of doing the same thing over and over again, making changes, moving things around, moving things over, doing whatever it takes because we get calls. Hey, listen, I only learn from failure. So if I learn if there's a problem, something happens, we didn't think about this or whatever, let's go ahead and address it. And in that addressing, yes, something new happens, some change happens, something does. The bleed button on the controllers.
Yeah.
Much needed. Why? Because this way people can bleed their tank. They can drain a tank like this.
Yep.
If they're at a track, they can change their alcohol. Another thing, the bleed.
Or if they accidentally, I don't know if you remember this, Wendy, on the dyno, they put E98 in the tank. And I'm like, man, it's weird. This car's running really, really fat. I don't remember that. I used the bleed button, bled it right out, put the methanol in there, got back to boogieing. So that happens too.
Anything could happen. I got a bad batch of alcohol, So how did it tell me shelf life on methanol? That's another question we didn't hit. That just is a quick one.
I feel like I'm going to regret that.
If the alcohol is clear, it's fine.
It's in a drum. I can't see it.
When you have it out, get a little glass.
If I pump it out the drum, I can't see it. How do we fix that?
Well, you have a container you're pumping out of the drum into.
Straight in the car. I'm playing the devil's advocate here because that's
If
what
you
people
have,
are going to say.
like the 85, how do you sample it?
I don't. I have a flex
Wow.
sensor, GM.
Wow.
I can tune it.
If that's the case, well, I mean, if somebody, if your tank's
Again,
full,
hold on.
get a straw, man.
Don't take that. Don't take that as advice. I understand that I'm not doing that the right.
But
I
I mean,
do
if
rely on
it's
my
clear,
flex sensor,
if
but
the
you're right,
alcohol,
yeah.
if the alcohol is clear,
I feel like somebody's going to take
it's
that
fine.
as advice.
If the alcohol picks up moisture, the first thing it does, it changes colors. It turns brown.
Oh.
It looks like dirty water. So when the alcohol's been sitting in a tank for a long period of time and it picks up moisture, it changes colors. It no longer looks like vodka. It starts looking like a rum, like a brown rum, and then when it looks like that, then that's when, get it out of there.
And
It's got
that's
a lot of
because
moisture.
it is hygroscopic, right?
Yes, it picks up moisture.
Yeah. So I learned that fancy word. But yeah, well, so does E85.
They all do.
And then they just suddenly,
And when that
you leave that
E85
container open and you start seeing, oh, this is E90 now. No, it's not.
No.
That's water.
And when you run that kind of stuff through injectors, when it's got the water in it,
Yeah.
it kills everything. It goes to town and it tears up everything. So anyway, that's how you can tell. Like you can have a drum of alcohol, for 10 years and it's not a problem. Just keep it sealed.
So the shelf life, do you know what the actual shelf life is?
I don't think they have a shelf life. I've had a drum in my shop now for 6 years and I pull it out and it's still perfectly clear.
That's totally why I'm asking. I've got an old drum I've been using for a long time.
I don't know if it's a wise tale. I keep mine off the ground. I just got like a little moving
Mine's on
canister.
board.
Yeah, like a board.
Wood, yeah.
The same thing we do with car batteries. You just don't put them on concrete. Some people say that doesn't
I
matter.
put them on
whatever.
concrete because it bothers people.
Oh, that's a
They're
good
all
one.
dead though, so
They're all dead.
it's probably true. Am I lying?
There you
There's
go.
a pile of dead
The batteries on concrete. Don't do that. I was like, it's well. Anyway, I keep the methanol off of the floor. And I keep it from
and
getting
grounded.
moisture.
I don't know if that matters, but I ground my drum.
Mine out on ground. See, I'm worse than you are. I'm not
Well,
adding a ground lead to
that was
it.
more of a safety thing. That's like you can't. When the fire inspector comes in, if you have drums in your shop and your fire inspector shows up and those drums aren't grounded, you can get in trouble for that. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
I try to stay in compliance.
Okay. A little
Um,
clamp on them and
That's all it was.
buzz
Just
bar.
that, and I made a wire. I didn't go buy one. I made one.
Oh.
Okay. But
Okay.
it's supposed to stop statics. I don't know. He said it.
Okay.
But anyways, I think this covered
So
everything.
you don't rub
really
your
well.
hair and then put your finger in the tank.
Oh, I do. I was just saying you shouldn't.
Okay.
But I think we covered everything.
I think so,
and
too.
I appreciate you coming
And
over.
anything that might not have been covered, any other questions, feel free to post them up. Ask
Yeah.
Justin, or more than welcome to call us at our company, alkycontrol.com. We're pretty easy to find. And, again, the best I can tell anybody is if you have any questions, reach out. Just leave me a message. I'll walk you through. I'll do the best that I can from afar. I mean, honestly, the best is when I have something hands on deck and the vehicle is here. But if it's not here, I'll do what I can do from over the phone, and I help everybody. I'll go the college effort. And I try. And I can
back that up. I've been using it. I'm trying to count it now. I've been tuning 15 years. I've been using your product for 14 of those years. And I've never had an issue getting you on the phone at all.
Yeah. And not perfect. And there's no company that is perfect. That is bar for none. And it could be that after all the tests that we do, something that leaves the door may not be perfect. And that goes for any business and any company. Right. But the thing is that if somebody doesn't call and doesn't explain the problem and we can't figure that out, then we never know. And at the same time, if there is something wrong, we want to go above and beyond to take care of that situation so there isn't a problem.
Yeah. But if you guys have questions on this after this, if there's something that we missed, put it in the comments. If he doesn't see it, I'll reach out and I'll get that answer for you, because again, that's what this is for. This is for getting that information out there. With that, man, thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I'll see y'all on the next one.
For sure.
Thank you.